Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the July 2025 edition of Epic Insight. This is Joe Corona, and I'm the Director of Sales and Strategic Partnerships at Epic Retirement Plan Services, and I will be your host for today's call. In finals presentations, your team's communication skills can make or break whether they win a retirement plan opportunity. No matter how successful they've been in the past, there is always room for further refinement of individual and team abilities, a decisive advantage in a hyper-competitive process. Today's workshop will help sales presentation leaders and team members hone their delivery to help win more plans. With that in mind, we are excited to have joining us Ryan Sullivan from Hartford Funds. Ryan is a Vice President and Managing Director of Applied Insights at Hartford Funds. He leads communication workshops around the country and speaks on a variety of financial and practice management topics, with a focus on retirement research from the MIT Age Lab. To date, Ryan has provided insights to audiences in 46 states and Puerto Rico, as well as led over 1,000 webinars, and we're excited to have him lead ours today. So before I turn it over to Ryan, I want to remind you that your line will be muted throughout the call, but if you have any questions that you would like addressed, please enter them in the webinar control panel, and we will address them at the end of the session. With that, I will turn it over to Ryan.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Joe. Thanks to everyone at Epic Retirement Plan Services, and especially thanks to you all for joining. Appreciate you taking the time. There is a lot going on, so the fact that you're here, obviously showing that you're intent on refining your skills relative to the ability to communicate and connect with plan sponsors, participants. I know we have folks in a variety of roles, but I think the title says it well. Joe set us up, framing the conversation, and this idea to refine. You're already doing a lot well. It's why you're all successful, but we can always optimize how we communicate and connect. The title does mention finals presentations. That is a focus for what we'll discuss. But as you folks know, there are many conversations before and after, especially if things go well. So these same tips that we'll share can be used in a variety of formats. We've been delivering this now for over 2 years, in part due to sales leaders telling us that after the pandemic, with as many virtual and hybrid meetings, and if you all would agree that even if we're in person, meetings tend to be shorter, and if the meeting itself isn't, our attention span definitely is. None of you will be surprised by research from Harvard that says that we spend 47% of our waking hours thinking of something other than what we're doing. So hopefully you're still listening to me, but you might also be thinking about a client you need to call back, what you're going to have for dinner, your fantasy football league, the important stuff. So what we'll cover in our fairly short time together, we'll talk a bit about if we have less time, certainly less attention from other people, how we can be better prepared. Next, how to present in a way that's a bit more fluid, flexible, adaptable. And last, how can we propel things forward to keep momentum in the sales process, to offer and seek feedback in a way that helps our whole team to improve. Now, you folks know, because this is a sales-oriented presentation, we are required by law to include at least one sports quote. But I think this is a good one, and that is, it's not just the will to win. We all have that. You do, all of your competitors do. You put us in a conference room with the plan sponsor committee, we're going to do our best. But that will to prepare to win, the extra effort up front, again, you folks spending the time today. What we found in working with top advisors, TPAs, record keeper partners, that all in, the folks at the top of their game are open to practice, to coaching, to feedback, even though sometimes they're not exactly sure how best to get that. If the ultimate goal is that we want to be able to more quickly build trust, to better communicate and connect, not a bad place to start. If you've read the book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why, or seen his TED Talk, highly recommend it. But this whole idea to understand people's motivators, what a plan sponsor might need in a plan solution, that yes, as you look here at a obviously very simplified format, thinking through the different people you might interact with on a plan sponsor committee. So yes, we want to know their motivators, what they need, but also to understand their why not. Where have they been burned before? What are their deal breakers? So of course, if we can have a pre-call, any information we can get up front, all of that is helpful. But we can also help refine how it is that you leverage tools, even like LinkedIn, to better understand the people you'll be working with. The challenge we put to teams who will be presenting together, that if this were a blank template where you had the names and roles, could you fill in their specific motivators and concerns using their words when possible? If you're not sure how to do that in LinkedIn, we do a lot of related coaching with that. Of course, you folks all have LinkedIn profiles. If you're like most people I interact with, maybe you haven't updated it in a while. The encouragement to do that, reality that for people to get a very quick sense of your curb appeal, just like real estate, your experience, your expertise, we do a lot of related coaching, helping financial professionals to fine tune their profile, but also how to better understand the people they'll be working with, where and how to look to find information about what they're commenting on, what they're concerned about. If that's of interest to you, certainly you can let your Epic Retirement Plans sales consultant know. We can talk through how best to arrange that. But ultimately in this section, what we want to do is help people think just a little more intentional about how they're going to present. Certainly you have content that you'll use, but how will you communicate within your team if your time is cut short, if you need to manage the number of slides, you're running behind, all things that making for the smooth transitions. Ultimately, it's just like the relay races in the Olympics. If you saw that last summer, where the teams that won weren't necessarily the fastest runners. They're the ones that had the smoothest transitions. So we ask of teams how they prepare. Do they practice? The hope is yes. Even if you're a skilled presenter, that if you're working with someone on your team who's a subject matter expert, but maybe they're not as comfortable yet in a virtual environment or in person, why that practice is important, and how can you get feedback during the process? So one to check out next time you're in PowerPoint, if you want to jot down the following words: rehearse with coach, rehearse with coach. So you put into the search window in PowerPoint those three words, hit enter, you get put into presentation mode as you're used to, but you enable an AI tool that doesn't record what you say, but it does monitor it to let you know things like if you're speaking too quickly. Let's be honest, any of us if overcaffeinated can talk way too fast. Or if like you have one of those days when you like too many crutch words, it lets you know which ones you use and how often. Maybe the best part, it lets you know if you just read the bullet points aloud. We've all been in that meeting where someone could have emailed us the deck. All of those things help. But next, if we have the practice down, also just working through with our team how we'll handle any tech issues. That yes, of course, you should have more than one presenter with a copy of the slides, the ability to bring those up. Even better, to consider having an email addressed to the people that you'll be speaking with in that meeting. Attach any files you plan to share, but don't send it beforehand. Leave it in your draft folder. Why steal your own thunder? Then if there is an issue, you just open up the draft folder, click send. It saved me a few times. But the last one, having a process within your team that if there's a tech issue, someone's going to speak up and keep control of the meeting. So this is probably 6 months ago now, where I'm doing a virtual meeting, and at this point my audio And after about 5 seconds, someone on my team said, "Hey, Ryan, it sounds like you're having some trouble with your audio. I'll let you address that." And folks, let me recap what Ryan has shared so far. And with that, let me know of the problem, but kept control of the meeting. Again, shows we're poised, prepared, all of that. If we do better preparation, better practice, builds more confidence within our presenting team. Another football quote, Vince Lombardi, former coach of the Green Bay Packers, once said, "Confidence is contagious, so is lack of confidence." And so to have it be where your team feels well prepared, because if you've been in the situation where one person is too anxious, has the jitters, that can easily spread. But ultimately, if that gets us to the start of a presentation, last football reference, I promise, how do we not fumble the kickoff? American Football Reference, as you know, but simple things like understanding what names people would like to be called. I work with a colleague named Christopher. People try to shorten his name to Chris to show that they're buddies. He doesn't prefer that. He's not going to get up and leave a meeting, but you have not built some knowledge, the fact that we like and trust someone, none of that happens if we use the wrong name. Another place where you can put in your preferred name in LinkedIn and seek what others put in for theirs. But we get questions about things like introductions. Should each person introduce themselves on the team, have an MC do the whole thing? I'm actually a fan of the combo. Have each person speak real quick intro of themselves, their role, but then have someone who's MCing who can brag on that person a bit. Say a few things maybe they couldn't say about themselves. Also, not to front load too much all the awards, achievements, accolades. Certainly for Epic, a lot to brag about, but for your respective firms, think of it like a restaurant. You go to a nice restaurant, if the server brought you your appetizer, main course, and dessert all at once, you're probably overwhelmed, not digesting that very well. So just to spread it out a bit. But next, we get a lot of questions about how we build engagement in virtual meetings. For example, that if you get into a virtual meeting and you find that no one has their webcams on, okay for today, but certainly if you want to see a committee, the suggestion in the email that you send beforehand, hey, look forward to seeing you and your team at 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, putting in just a couple of sentences to the effect of, we'll have our webcams on, we hope that you will. Be great to put a name and face together, or see you and your team, it's been a while. Simple suggestion that helps. Otherwise, as soon as you get into the meeting, to turn on your webcam. That if we do that, and we do it early, much better chance that folks will turn on theirs. If you'd agree, it's become almost like a game of chicken, and it does make a difference. The question is, what do we do with that? If we're using our webcam, are we using it to its best effect? Because I see a lot of folks who do this, who present to the center of their screen. At what point do you feel like I'm engaging with you? Got a lot of folks who do essentially tennis match watching, where they look at the video frames, or my new personal favorite, where people have multiple monitors. So they're looking at this monitor while they talk to this webcam. Again, when do you feel like I'm connecting with you? For most people, it's when we're looking towards the webcam. Research backs this up. The Journal of Applied Ergonomics had research that showed if we look at the webcam even just 30% of the time, more is preferable, that people remember what we say better. It's that simulation of eye contact. Another related study showed that if we use our webcam more often, look towards it while we're speaking, we're deemed to be more honest, open, and trustworthy. So the encouragement, if you have your webcam on, which we strongly encourage, about halfway through the presentation, find a reason to take the slides down. Say, folks, I'm going to take the slides down for a moment because I want to ask a question of the group, or I want to tell a story I think you'll find relevant. If you do it roughly in the middle, again at the Q&A, great way to have your confidence and conviction come through clearly. So simple things to practice, looking towards the webcam feels a bit unnatural, but will be a differentiator. Otherwise, as we think through the content that we're sharing, that so much of what people get from it is the body language, but simple things like even our tone of voice. So getting an external microphone, $20, if people get a sense that your voice sounds like you have more confidence and conviction, it makes a difference. But we'll focus here on what if we're not getting engagement. So our suggestion to use what we call turn signals. So imagine myself, my imaginary colleague, we'll call him Tim. So imagine where I'm trying to get input from anyone, I'm not getting it, so I'm just going to call on Tim, my colleague. What do you think, Tim? Well, if according to research, there's a 50% chance Tim isn't listening, am I really doing myself any favors where he's caught off guard, doesn't give good input feedback? So instead, to use a turn signal, if I were to say to the group, hey folks, I'm going to finish this thought, and then Tim, I'd love to get your input. I know you have a lot of experience with this. Now that other person is listening, they're going to give a much more informed response and much less of a sense that we're calling them out or putting them on the spot. So simple, easy ways to get more engagement. It can also work in passing between presenters. So instead of me just saying, now over to my colleague, Tim, who might not be ready to speak, the tech might not be ready. Instead, folks, I'm going to finish this thought, then I'm going to turn it over to Tim to talk about fiduciary risk. Now Tim's listening. I speak for either another 15 or 30 seconds. That's the key part. If I'm going to use a turn signal, just like with your car, you got to give a little notice before you transition. But the folks who've been doing this have said that meetings just go much more smoothly, less dead air or people talking over each other. Simple, easy one to implement. But what if we're still not getting the engagement, the questions? If people are only listening half the time, how do we increase the chance that they hear us when it matters? So folks, what I'm going to ask that you do, if you have a pen, you might want to jot the following down, that I'm going to share with you what are called flagging phrases. So the term comes from the world of public relations. It's kind of like waving a flag. What you say is important. If you all remember that feeling in school when a teacher would say, this is going to be on the final, everyone sits up and takes out their pens. So phrases like, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to know. Or here's how this impacts you. As soon as we hear something is going to impact us, we pay more attention. Another good one, to encourage people to jot something down. We can't tell them to do it, but I find when I suggest it, often folks will. And you've probably seen the research that says that when people handwrite something, especially their own handwriting, that they remember it better. So in a competitive situation, if they walk away from your portion of the meeting with handwritten notes, that's a differentiator. So that helps. Other things that help is how we use visuals. So I mentioned about alternating between you and the slides. We want to use some visuals in part because they increase retention. I hear from top professionals with various firms who say, my firm has great material. Epic has great material. Hartford Funds has great material. But I don't need that. People just listen to me. Yeah, about half the time, according to Harvard. So if we use a visual, back it up with what we say, it can increase retention up to fourfold, a 4x multiplier. So folks, I'm going to let you guess. You can lock in your mental answer, and I'll try to see if anyone gets close. So if the 4x multiplier applies to visuals, how much do stories increase retention? According to research from Stanford, it's higher than 4x. Ooh, I'm getting some good mental guesses. Are you surprised? It's up to 22 times, according to research from Stanford. And yet, you can all think of people who are truly horrible at telling stories. They talk in circles. There's no clear point. So if you still have your pen out, I'd encourage you to jot down the following 5 words. And the 5 words are what, so what, now what? What, so what, now what? The what, as you'd guess, the facts, figures, details, updates, we're good at that in our profession. We just tend to stop there. The so what, why should people care? How does it help them move closer to a positive outcome for the firm, their participants, or avoid a negative consequence? And then the now what? What's that next small but meaningful step they can take to move things forward? If you have stories that you tell often, I'd encourage you to hold it up to that outline. The what, so what, now what. If there isn't a clear so what and now what to that, the encouragement just to tweak your story a bit. Otherwise, as we're going through the presentation, obviously we want to get Q&A. The encouragement there, for one, that we move that up a little bit. So to have a 10-minute warning if we're doing an interactive meeting, to say, hey folks, we have about 10 minutes left. Here's what we had left on the agenda. Is there anything you wanted to make sure we get covered today? And then doing the Q&A close to that point. The problem, if we save it to the very end of the meeting, you've all been there where if no one asks a question, you lose energy, or you get a question where you don't have an immediate answer, or it's just a negative question about markets, politics, you name it. So instead, to move it up a bit. The one other tip with Q&A is not to mistake silence for agreement. Not to mistake silence for agreement. If someone says, hey, Ryan, can your firm do X, Y, Z? No, we can't. I say that, there's no follow-up. I feel like I've answered their question. Well, I might have just talked myself out of a potential opportunity. So instead to say, is that important to you? Why do you ask? If we weren't able to do that, but we could do this as an alternative, would that be useful? Otherwise, leaving time for us to start talking through why us, why this solution, why now, AKA what, so what, now what, and then having a definitive ending that we as human beings, we remember what we see first and last. So to have it be that the first and last things folks see, especially in a virtual or hybrid meeting, is us at our best, looking confident. So I'm going to give you another visual example here that I'll show you how to do this. You all can decide if you want to try it. And this is what we call sticking the landing. So if you'd agree, ending virtual meetings can be a little awkward. It's kind of like a romantic comedy. You hang up. No, you hang up. So the key here is that you put your mouse over the webcam button where you turn it on or off. Then you have a definitive statement. You've already talked through the why the solution. Then to say, we'll send the detailed recap after this. We look forward to seeing you and your team again at XYZ time next Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again. Really enjoyed speaking with you. And while you're smiling and looking at the webcam, you turn it off. Now, why to do that versus leaving the meeting? If you click to leave the meeting, it's a curse that's happened to me twice. As soon as I go to leave the meeting, someone says, hey, wait, I have a question, and you're already gone. The other thing you get, if you turn off the webcam and then leave the meeting, I'm not saying to stick around and lurk, but I believe it's fair in the couple of moments before you do leave the meeting that as people are turning off their webcams, they're leaving the meeting, you get just a couple of seconds of unfiltered feedback. Are they smiling, rubbing their chin in the universal sign that says, that was useful information? Or is, you'd guess, the one I get more often, the indication that I talk too much? Either way, it's good feedback for us. But otherwise, as we're starting to wind things down, that of course you folks know that after the meeting, you want to send that detailed recap. You want to debrief with your team. But what we hear very often is teams feeling like they don't have a good feedback process. So for one, for us offering feedback to someone to first ask, hey, are you open to some feedback? Great place to start. Never had anyone say no. But then to consider structuring the feedback in the format of what, so what, now what? The what are you suggesting they change? So what, how can that help them or the team? And then now what? Are you going to role play with them, point them to resources, help them with some training, showing that we're invested in their success? For us to ask for feedback, just making it clear that we're really looking for constructive feedback and not a pat on the head. Very simply, if we give a little feedback about ourselves, if I were to say to Joe after this, hey, Joe, I felt like it was a little rushed at the beginning. I felt like I was talking very fast. Joe might say, yeah, that was fine. It was the fact you said 400 times. So as we wind things down, I'll turn it over to Joe in a moment to see if we have any questions. That if you're interested, we have a lot of related content. Joe mentioned the fact that our team works a lot with the MIT Age Lab content for plan sponsors, for participants. If you have a local Hartford Funds advisor consultant or DCIO partner, even better to contact your Epic sales consultant. We can work together, provide some information there. Also related coaching, LinkedIn, helping you with your audio lighting, simple things that can help you fine tune those differentiators that otherwise people don't pay enough attention to. So with that, I will pause, turn it to Joe, and see if we do have any questions.
Well, thank you, Ryan. We appreciate all the great content. And as Ryan mentioned, we are going to open the floor up for a few minutes of questions. So if you do have something that you would like to run by us, please enter it into the question panel now. One question that I had, Ryan, in preparation for this session, because I find obviously preparing for presentations and the different strategies and tactics, very interesting, because so many different ways nowadays, obviously, of presenting. You mentioned the virtual versus the in-person. But one thing that I've always looked at is I'm one that have always liked to present first. So if I ever get the choice of you want to be first, second, or third to present, I'm one to always volunteer to be first. Is there any study that shows success rate on depending on when the presenter goes, whether it's first, second, or third in order? Is there anything related to that you can address, or that any of your readings or research can tie back to?
Not that say which one's best, because part of that comes down to what degree do you have strengths relative to the competitors? Are you the incumbent? But more what strategies you would do with each depending on which spot you're in. So my suggestion to folks is don't have a favorite spot, what you choose. That's kind of like having lucky clothes, that if you have a lucky shirt and then you stain that shirt, you're in trouble, versus having a definitive plan you'd use if you're first versus a very different one if you're last. For example, if you're first, setting up some, people use terms like minds. I'm not a huge fan of that mindset, but very simply, hey, you're going to be hearing for some other people. Here's what you want to look out for to decide if it's the right solution for you. So you lay out the framing of the conversation and things that you know to be your strengths that may not be for your competitors. On the flip side, if you're later or last, to acknowledge that what other people said sounded similar. So folks, I'm going to guess that your brains are pretty full. And at this point, it might be tough to tell what the difference is, even from the folks you've heard before we share what we're about. So what we're going to focus on instead is what's different that we're offering. Another way to put that, to say, folks, we could make a case that we think we're the best in the industry, but in reality, what's important and what we hope you'll focus on is why we think we're the best for your plan, your participants in this situation, and all of that, just getting to how we carve out a unique place in their mind based on what we're focused on. So I hope that helps. But Joe, anything else that you'd add?
That was wonderful. One last item that I wanted to mention, I believe it was on your slide prior to this last one, talked about asking for feedback. And one thing that I encourage our team to do is not only asking for that feedback when you win a presentation or when you're successful at winning a piece of business that you've presented on, but maybe more so and more importantly, when you lose an opportunity and you kind of look back and think of what could we have done better to improve upon. Well, you've got a group that you've just presented to. They're going to be the best group to tell you and provide you feedback on what they saw in your presentation versus the others, and was it price related, was it presentation related. So I thought that was a very key part that I know that we stress to try to gather as much feedback so that we can then talk about it collectively as a team to figure out how do we improve and refine whether it's our presentation decks or how we present in either a winning or not or in a losing effort. We try to gather that feedback from prospective clients.
Great point. I think folks don't do that enough. Although the one thing, Joe, if you'd agree that sometimes people say when they ask, they often feel they're not given definitive feedback. Why? The one related suggestion that if folks aren't doing it currently, that as you're getting closer to the wrap up to that meeting, to consider saying, so we've shared where we are, the differentiators, why we think we are a great fit for this particular opportunity. What concerns do you have about what we've shared so far? And if we ask that close to wrap up, the opportunity, if they say, you know what, we'd have to talk as a group, but I really can't think of any, great. It seems like you're in a strong position. Or if they say, you know what, the sense is that you just don't have X, Y, Z, that at least you have the opportunity to address it in the moment, provide a little more oomph to that particular perceived weakness or challenge. So again, something else for people to consider.
Absolutely, without question. Well, it looks like we are all set with questions. So we'd like to thank Ryan and all of you for joining us for this Epic Insight webinar. As a reminder, we will be sending out a copy of today's presentation as a follow-up. As always, please do not hesitate to contact us if there's anything that Epic Retirement Plan Services or our partners at Hartford Funds can do to support you and your efforts. We thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again on our next edition of Epic Insight.
Thanks all. Take care.